Well, I guess I miss talking about this show too much. So even though I finished up my coverage of Black Mirror, I kind of still want to talk about it a little bit more because I really enjoyed the show. So I'm going to rank all 19 episodes that have aired to date, from bottom to top. So I had considered doing what I did with the episodes of Firefly and doing the, every episode in 10 words or less and then ranking them. I actually found it really hard to do with this show. I don't know if it's because, since everything is a completely different self-contained episode, they're just much harder to sum up in a way that feels like it works, or maybe it's the tone. I don't know. I may still do that at some point, but I couldn't pull it together right now. But I am going to give you the order of the whole thing. Enough preamble. Starting down at the bottom. Number 19, Men Against Fire. This one was probably the one episode of Black Mirror that I felt didn't do or really tried to do anything that I hadn't seen before, or do it in a way that was excessively better than what I'd seen before, which pretty much every other episode of Black Mirror ever has done. It's either done something that I haven't seen, or it's taken something that I've seen in a new direction, or it's just executed at a higher level than I've ever seen before. And this just didn't. The whole central concept of the altered perception of soldiers so that it's easier for them to kill their targets. I've seen it done, and I've seen it done as a twist, and I felt like they over foreshadowed it. The idea wasn't that unique. The execution of it wasn't that unique. It's still a solid piece of television. I don't think Black Mirror has made a flat out bad episode, but this was about the only one that I checked my watch during. Only time it happened. So moving up one to number 18, we have the Waldo moment. I really went back and forth between this or Men Against Fire being the bottom one. Ultimately, I gave it to Men Against Fire, and this one gets the slight edge because I find the ideas more interesting here than I did with Men Against Fire. But I do feel this is one of the rare times where it didn't quite coalesce. It didn't quite come together. I feel like the ideas aren't building on each other the way that most Black Mirror episodes they actually do. And while I certainly appreciate it and I understand its relevance in terms of British politics specifically, with the fact that joke candidates are actually more of a thing over there, and like I get all that. I get the context. I get what it's doing. I get what it's saying, but it's not all knitting together. The elements of, the parody of the political process, the creator losing control of his creation, the way the technology and the instant creation of this animated thing contributes to that. Like they aren't building on each other. They feel like separate elements that were just thrown together in the same story. So it doesn't quite work for me. Number 17, Archangel. So now we're pretty much out of the episodes that I would argue had fundamental problems with them, and now we're into ones that just didn't connect with me personally the way that they were probably intended to. Because I know there's plenty of people, because I saw it in my own comments, who really took to Archangel. And maybe it's because I never had the kind of relationship with my own mother that this character has, and my kid isn't a teenager yet. So maybe it's just that I don't have the frame of reference that's necessary to really hook into this particular episode. But I can watch it and I can appreciate it in terms of, over monitoring, helicopter parenting, there is such thing as protecting your kids too much, but it just didn't quite engage me on an emotional level, which the vast majority of Black Mirror episodes do. So I kind of watched it, and at the end I'm like, yeah, that was a little out there, and then walked away, and it didn't leave much impact. Number 16, Black Mirror, which is actually an episode I enjoy a lot, but it's also probably the episode that is one of the ones that feels the least like Black Mirror. And I don't want to put Black Mirror in a box too much, because I think different episodes can do completely different things. And what Black Mirror is kind of loose, but there is a feel to Black Mirror that I feel this lacks, because this feels like an episode of the HBO series of Tales from the Crypt, from when I was much younger, because it has that whole Between the sort of feeling like the guy who runs the museum is a bit like the host, taking you through these kind of horrific stories, and then ultimately ending in a bit of a twist, of a comeuppance, of a guy paying for his sins at the very end. Just, it feels, and it's a little bit campy in that way too, especially the Pain Addict, the first story, that it just doesn't. It has a vibe of a different show that would be Black Mirror-esque, but it's just a little too different. Again, not bad by any means, still enjoyable. And I enjoyed it because I watched season 4 first. I enjoyed it even not catching all the Easter eggs and references to earlier episodes of the show. So that was a good way to handle that element. They're there. If you see them, you recognize them and you like them, but they're actually not necessary to recognize to enjoy the story all the same. Number 15. Playtest. One of the other ones that feels a little bit less like Black Mirror in terms of its presentation, because it's one of the most straightforward episodes, because pretty much as soon as you get the premise, like he's going to be testing an altered reality horror game, like, you know where this is going to go, and it goes exactly where you expect it to go. It is still well executed, though, and this is where we get into that thing where sometimes what Black Mirror does isn't the most unique or surprising thing in the world, but it just does it at a really high level, and I do think that is the case here. I think that Charlie Brooker's own knowledge of the video game world and how games actually work make it way more believable, because so often when video games show up as plot drivers or plot devices in shows or movies, they were obviously written by someone who does not understand games, either how they work or why people play them. So this has that understanding, which is a big part of why it works better than these sorts of stories usually do. But there is something about that almost excessive straightforwardness to it that makes me go, that was fine. Number 14, Shut Up and Dance. This is one that I know hit a lot of people really hard, especially with the revelations towards the end. The thing for me, though, is that the revelations at the end about our main character particularly kind of made me enjoy it less. And I mean, I know we're not supposed to enjoy that twist. It's supposed to make you feel like, kind of gross. And I think it does, but I also think there was an earlier episode that kind of did that same thing better, for starters, and then it also altered the nature of what was going on in such a way that I found it less interesting. I talked about this in more detail in my review of the episode, but in my head, how I thought this was working and why I thought it was happening, I found that setup that I had in my mind more intriguing than what it is ultimately revealed to be going on in terms of why this particular kid got swept up in all this. So yeah, that bumps it down a little bit for me, but I do get that a lot of people are really sort of find this one particularly effective, and more so than I did. Number 13, Hang the DJ. So this is an episode that I do like, but a little bit like Shut Up and Dance, I like what I thought was going on more than the final reveal of what actually is going on. So that impacts things a little bit. I think for some people, their opinion of this might go up or down, since it's not the first sort of happy ending that Black Mirror episode that Black Mirror did. That was San Junipero, and this came after that. But of course, I saw this one first, so it was a very pleasant surprise to get a nice, uplifting, sweet episode. And I like the dynamics between the characters. I like sort of showing these relationships, and they're stuck in for however long, and just seeing how they break down. Some they follow there instantly, they know this is wrong, but they're still stuck in it. Other times, like, this is amazing, and it's over like that. And you keep circling back to someone like, but what could have been there? Was there something there? And I think it captures that quite well. But like I said, the one issue that I have with it is realizing at the end that the whole thing is a simulation. I don't like as much as what I thought was happening. And what I thought was happening was that these people, they agree to this program that they're in that, says, okay, now you're with this person, now you're with this person, now you're with that person. And the program is only focused on the results, getting you that perfect match at the end. And it doesn't care whether or not you enjoy the process of getting there, because a computer doesn't care about your feelings. An algorithm doesn't give a damn as to whether or not you're enjoying this, as long as it gets the right final result. And I liked that seemed to be at play for the internal logic of the simulation, but then to find out that it's a simulation kind of alters what was going on in the first place in a way that isn't bad, but I just don't like as much as what I thought was the case. So that's why it's not higher than here. Number 12, Crocodile. This was the first episode of Black Mirror that just left me feeling drained and emotionally beaten up. And I thought it was going to land higher on the list before I came to ordering the whole thing. But we are now at this point getting into episodes that did have real serious impact on me in one way or another. And it's more of a question in terms of their ranking, how much that impact hit me and sort of how it was panned out and spread out across the episode. So this one, I mean, it's watching the downward spiral, and it is well played out. I think ultimately the reason I have it lower is just because when I'm comparing it in terms of assembling of the story and the way it goes about everything, I just think it's not quite at the same execution level of most of the stuff that I have listed higher, and I think it sort of leans on just the luridness of what is going on for its shock value rather than sort of more the intellectual concepts being terrifying, which is sort of my preferred version of Black Mirror for the most part. Number 11, Nosedive. Now this was an episode that did not always connect for me. There's basically a stretch in the middle where, I'm not going to say it lost me, but I wasn't nearly as engaged, but that first chunk and then the end, those got me so much that it ends up higher than I think I thought I was going to put it, because I did kind of disengage from that middle bit a little bit. But when it is establishing the way the society works, the way social media is driving our actions, and the way that we alter ourselves and who we are and how we behave based on that and the seeking of that approval, yeah, as somebody with attempting to build a social media following, that hit close to home. And then ending on this really bizarrely uplifting note that didn't feel like it undermined how Black Mirror is. Like, I hesitate to call it a happy ending, but it's like, yeah, that feels right. Okay, top 10 time. Next up, Metalhead. Now, I know this is an episode that a lot of fans seem to not like particularly well, and I think it's just because it is just such a departure in terms of how Black Mirror usually tends to be. Now, bear in mind, I saw season 4 first, so I saw this before I had as firm a sense in my head of what Black Mirror is supposed to be. So I didn't have those same expectations that this may or may not have failed to meet, and maybe I would have had a different opinion of it if I'd watched the whole thing in order, but I really like this episode, and I like the departures it takes, and I think the way that it's shot, doing it in black and white, is really well done. I like the dogs. I like the simplicity of them. This thing is built for efficiency only, and it's not this big bulky thing to look intimidating and scary. It doesn't need to. It's just built to be a really effective hunting killing machine. That's all it has to do. So I like all of that. It's really tense and it's harrowing, honestly. And I know a lot of people, like the last image of the fact that all they were after were teddy bears, seems to throw a lot of people off. For me, it feels perfect because it really drives home how hopeless the world is for whatever reason it's in the state that it's in, because these people were willing to risk their lives for something that innocuous, because that's how little hope there is in this world, that it's worth risking your life just to give a sliver of hope to a dying child. Like, that's bleak. That's really bleak, and it felt right. And I think part of the other thing is people got annoyed because it's not as well explained in terms of how we got here and why things are the way they are as Black Mirror usually is. But for me, for this story, it works. Number 9, Hated in the Nation. Killer robot bees. This should be dumb. This should be campy. This should be laughable, and it's not. And again, it's tapping into an understanding of social media and social media mentality and the way people can be, and also acknowledging the different rationalizations and justifications that people have for being, for lack of a better term, dickheads on the internet. You know, there are people who do it because they think it's funny. There are people who do it because they honestly think the person they're directing their anger towards is a horrible person. They're doing it for a lark. some motivations are more inherently, malicious than others, but it's still wrong. And this sort of meting out this retribution of, it doesn't matter why you did it, and now you're going to pay for it. That was, I think it was just really well executed. I thought the build to it was nice, and like I said, the robot beasts should have been laughable, but I think they were well executed and they worked better and better and better the longer the episode kept going, and they were used more. I'm like, man, okay, yeah, this works. Number 8, the entire history of you. Another good one, sort of drilling into the fact that there are some things about the way that we are wired as people that we would be better not, quote unquote, improving that, because humans don't have perfect memory. We're not built to have perfect memory, and honestly, as social animals, it's a bad thing for us to have perfect memory, because so much of our moving forward in life is not being able to go through our memories and go through everything with a fine-tooth comb, but instead, remembering, it was more or less like this, and then you move on. But when you can go back and literally scroll through exactly what was said, see exactly what you saw again, hear the exact words that people said to you, you become, first of all, you become overly obsessed with the past. And then in addition to that, you lose the ability to, frankly, lie to yourself or to ignore details, which we do as humans. We filter, we ignore, sometimes because we figure stuff doesn't matter, sometimes for the sake of our own ego, our own ability to live our daily lives, we don't notice some stuff. And going back and then starting to notice it and notice everything because you keep going back over and over and over again, watching how that impacts people, filter through this couple, is just really well executed, and a good demonstration of how, not necessarily that technology is scary, but how some things that technology now allows us to do, is that something that we as a species can actually cope with properly? Yeah. Number 7, White Bear. So this is the episode that I think did what Shut Up and Dance tried to do with its twist ending better, in terms of having a character that we have been with, sympathized with, been rooting for, and find out that they are a terrible person, or that they at some point in their life did something truly atrocious, and sort of feeling dirty for having rooted for them. But then this one also adds that extra layer on top of that of, you still can't quite abandon feeling sorry for her as you realize she's just going to go through this over and over and over again, and these people are taking this weird, sick enjoyment out of what they're calling justice, but this seems wrong, and yet what she did and what she was involved in was so terrible. It does result in a wonderful conflict, I think, for me internally, but also between people, because the comment section on that particular episode, when I reviewed it, was probably the most divided in terms of how people felt about the episode. Not whether they liked it or not, but whether they thought what happened to her was acceptable or not. And there were, and thankfully it was kept polite, and nobody was a jerk to anybody else, because I have awesome subscribers. But there was a fair number of people who were like, this is horrible. Doesn't matter what she did. This should never happen to anyone. There were other people who said, it doesn't matter what they do to her. Anything is too good for her. I have no moral qualms about what's going on here. And seeing that divide between audiences, to me, just points to how well this works. Number 6, the national anthem. Man, that is a heck of a way to kick off. That is putting something really uncomfortable and making you see it. Like, we're not just going to play, like, this is what's going on here. And it's not like necessarily going, this is what Black Mirror is about, but it's saying, if you can't handle this, there's the door. And I don't blame anybody who saw this episode and went, this show is not for me. And I think that was very much the intention of it. And it comes in and it hits hard and it's darkly funny, but then it also doesn't let the inherent ickiness of what is going on go away completely either. And I think ultimately this episode is made by the last few seconds, the little extra bits that we see during the closing credits. Because after everything that's gone on, watching people support the prime minister, go against him, not want him to do this, want him to do this, watch whether they want to or not, whether they are grinning, disgusted, all these reactions, all of that eventually fades and doesn't matter, and ultimately didn't seem to impact him. But then he gets in private with his wife, and she cannot even look at him, because the impact on the world at large, the social media sphere, almost anything, I'm not going to say anything, but almost anything that you could do for, whether it is makes you look good or makes you look awful, is going to be short-lived, because the world moves on. But the people immediately close to you don't just move on, because it's not a fleeting thing for them. They have to deal with it. She has to look at him every day and be confronted with what it was that happened, what it was that he did. And she can't. And that may or may not be fair in terms of, his reasons for doing it and anything else, but that's the reality. The world can choose to forget or ignore what happened. She can't. She's confronted with it every time she sees him, and those last few seconds really bump this up a lot. Number 5, be right back. Examining grief is a tricky thing to do, because it can very easily become maudlin and melodramatic and laughable. But it's not here. It's handled with a very high degree of honesty. The way that we try to hold on to what we've lost, and we think, boy, if I could just have one more day, then what we think we would give, what we would be willing to do to have that. And to watch it play out, and to watch it all start to unravel for her, because and it's very much the same with memorabilia. And again, I think it's a good commentary on social media, because thanks to social media, once someone is gone, we can look through their Instagram feeds, their Facebook posts, and all this stuff, and feel like we can touch them again in a way. But that's not a complete picture, because we self-edit. There are parts of ourselves we don't show there. And it can be a salve, it can be a balm at first for a little bit. But then over time, you realize everything that's missing, everything that made up who this person is, that you can't get again, that you can't get access again, that no number of old posts, shared memories, there are things you cannot recapture, and that gap just gets wider over time, until what's missing is all you see. And then finally but also her not being able to let go, and up he goes into the attic with the memorabilia, with the things that you can't let go of, but you can't look at anymore, because it hurts too much. It rings really true. It's a great examination of grief. It's a great episode. Number 4, this was an episode I did not know how to evaluate this in terms of this ranking. Because this one, oh God, White Christmas. This one destroyed me. I mean, Crocodile did get to me pretty harshly, and I mentioned that. This episode wrecked me. And I couldn't even talk about it properly without choking up. If you didn't see that review that I did for that, it was hard to even talk about this episode, which certainly speaks to its effectiveness. But I did wonder, is that blinding me to possible issues with it? Since it wasn't necessarily a pleasant emotional experience, do I want to put that high or low? But it was astoundingly effective for what it was trying to do. At least with me, it was. And yeah, I have to put it this high, because, like I said, it just destroyed me. That last segment, finding out about, well, not just the ending, finding out about what happened to the girl, everything leading up to that, because I felt bad for the guy who thought it was his kid, and then watching that all unravel and just seeing it end in that, oh God, it was awful. It was horrifying, and it hit me in a way that not a lot of things do, because there are plenty of things that can make me cry, either for good reasons or bad reasons, but things that actually leave me broken, which this episode did. That's a real short list, and this is on it. Number 3, USS Callister. First episode I ever saw, and definitely still one of my favorites. I love everything going on in here. I love the balance of elements. I like the look and the campiness that the set of the Callister itself has. I love the insight into Daly as a character. I love the way that these people who have been trapped inside here are coping or trying to cope. You know, it's and the way that non-player characters view a player character in a video game when they know they're in a video game and they're stuck at the whims of this guy who they can't stand, but it's here for him and they have to go by that. And the existential thoughts that it makes you think, and again, sort of coming back to themes about, like, look, you can rationalize it as they're just ones and zeros, they're not really people, but this is still awful, atrocious behavior, and you have to wonder to a certain degree. But it hooks you in with them, it makes you care about them, it's funny at moments where it could really use a bit of levity. It ends on one of the more upbeat notes that Black Mirror could end on, and almost triumphant, but yet undercutting it slightly by reminding everyone, like, yeah, they're just kind of out on the internet right now. The internet's kind of awful. Let's not forget that. So not being overly triumphant about it. This is a fun episode of Black Mirror. There are not many of those, but this is one. Number 2, 15 Million Merits. This might be, in my mind, the quintessential Black Mirror episode in terms of having, honestly, a lot going on, but it all feels so complete. The way that it comments on how we spin our wheels for rewards that aren't even real, for intangible things that don't matter, and how we get lured and like this carrot dangled in front of us, these impossible dreams. Like, that's ridiculous. And then even getting that dream, it can easily be a nightmare. And yet, at the same time, after that amazing breakdown performance from Daniel Kaluuya, holding that glass to his throat, that ultimately, even though he knows the system is wrong, it chews people out, and it homogenizes everything, the offer is too tempting. The way that corporations co-opt anger, outrage that's directed at them, and they still find a way to cash in on it. And it's just so... it speaks so much to the human experience in the 21st century, and sticks it in just this slight future, slight sci-fi world, and it feels just... it, like, everything means something, means everything. I've got my one nitpick about it, but I talked about that in the episode review proper, and honestly, that's unique to me. It's not a fault of the story, but I am going to address one thing here, because a lot of people asked in the comments on my review of that episode whether I thought that at the very end, when he looks out the window and he's seeing this forest, whether that is just a bigger screen or if that's actually a forest, because it seemed to be a lot of going back and forth. A lot of people seem to think it was just a bigger screen. I actually believe it's both. I believe that is a real forest out there, but he can't go out and experience it. So he traded his being surrounded by screens that show him fake things to being able to see something real, but still being unable to interact with it, still being unable to experience it directly. That is my belief. It is a gilded cage, and it's one that he chose, and it's one he is continuing to choose because he keeps putting out the episodes of this thing. And it yeah. It embodies how selling out happens to people who you wouldn't think that would happen to so well. It's great. But we got number 1, and I'm sure some of you have been ticking off on the list, so you already know what it is. Let's get to it. San Junipero. This is the episode I have gone back and rewatched the most since having finished the run of Black Mirror. And it is such a wonderful, touching experience that still feels like Black Mirror. The way that it manages to be touching and sweet and uplifting and joyous while still feeling like it belongs in the world where all this horrible stuff happens. It's just wonderful. It is amazing and touching and uplifting, and the chemistry between these two women is astounding, and just depicting how each is afraid of what their future might be, and afraid of trying to be with each other for different reasons, and wondering, do they see, are they actually understanding what I'm putting out there, and capturing that hesitation on both sides. And it is just wonderful. It's glorious, and it's becoming a bit of comfort food television for me at this point, where it's not like the world is all sunshine and rainbows, but even in a world where things are fake, things aren't real, it's all an illusion, you can still find real connections and real happiness and relate to people in a way that is genuine, regardless of how artificial the trappings are, how fake the way that you found each other is. It doesn't matter, because the connection's real. And that is beautiful and wonderful. That makes it my favorite episode of Black Mirror. So that's my ranking for the entirety of Black Mirror, at least until we get more episodes, which cannot come soon enough as far as I'm concerned. What is your ranking? I mean, if you want to do all 19, you can do that. If you want to just give a top 5 or a top and a bottom, however you want to do, whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. There's so many ways to follow me or support me on Patreon if you feel like it, and the links for all that stuff is down in the description. So until next time, this council's adjourned.